Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about the role of leadership in fostering workplace well-being. And our wonderful guest in our virtual studio today is Dr. Louise Lambert. And I would love to introduce her to everyone before we get started. Louise is a registered psychologist, College of Alberta Psychologist Canada, organizational consultant, researcher, and previous professor with experience in counseling, mental health, education, and primary health care. She has lived in the UAE for 20 years doing organizational and educational consulting, as well as teaching and research in the field of happiness and well-being. Her expertise is in positive psychology and the empirical strategies used to attain greater subjective well-being. As such, she has many peer-reviewed empirical publications in positive psychology intervention applications. She is currently the head of happiness programming and policy design with happinessmatters.org. Her work also includes the design, delivery, and assessment of the positive education programs at Dubai College and Kuwait's Al Noair Foundation. Hopefully I said that correctly. With previous employee training with clients such as Cigna Insurance Middle East, Emirates Global Aluminium, Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, KSA, Canadian Embassy in the UAE, and more. Dr. Louise is also the editor of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology, a peer-reviewed journal dedicated to regional well-being. Thank you so much for joining us, Louise. What an impressive bio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I always ask my guests this question because, for you to be able to get here in your career, I'm sure it has been one ride of a journey, and I'm sure it's not random that you got here. So what made you do this, in the first place? And how has it been going through all of the ups and downs of the career that you've had?
Honestly, it's been fun, and I wouldn't call it so much ups and downs because when you set your own barometer, then there's not, you don't need to follow a certain measure. I'm not necessarily following others. I'm just doing what is interesting and fun, what I can learn from. And I think I'm kind of driven by this love of learning and persistence. So it's been a lot of fun to do research in the region, particularly, but also to apply some of that research in organizational contexts in schools. And it's an interesting region to be in. So to see how these scientific findings look different in different regional contexts is also interesting. So there's always lots to discover.
Yeah, that sounds really fun for sure, given what you've done so far. And today we're going to get into, the depth of workplace well-being. And I know that you research happiness and well-being together. And we've got two shows on two topics. But workplace well-being is probably one that I'm currently most interested in, given how we are going, especially with the change constantly in the workplace right now, with the virtual workplace and so on. So we'll learn about that in a little bit. And before we do so, we have a section we called Have You Met Louise? And we get to know you through things that you love. My first question to you is, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book, honestly, your producer asked me to put a book under my laptop, and that book was Windows on the Complete World of Wine. So I do a lot of wine tasting. So I think one of my favorite books is What is this grape? Where is this from? What is the origin or the history of this particular drink, if you will? So these are a little bit of my side passions. Also, I get to use savoring and learning in different contexts. So that would be a good example of where I do that.
Yeah. Perfect. I love that. Something completely different, right? Because most of the time we get really serious recommendation. But, a book on wine, we love that. Thank you. What about a movie you've enjoyed recently?
Gosh, I haven't been to movies forever. I'm like really awful. Netflix, however, I do watch a lot of crime series. Except when the gory parts come, I literally put my hand up to because I don't want to see them. But I love a good crime mystery. So
Yeah.
anything from Eastern Europe, not American, I love.
Cool. Interesting. And I wonder if you listen to podcasts.
I actually don't. Isn't that
Yeah.
terrible?
No, not at
I
all.
listen to the news, but not podcasts.
Yeah, I asked that question because a lot of our guests actually don't listen to podcasts either. It's totally fine. I myself don't listen to podcasts. I prefer audiobooks recently. So, I hear you there. How about a role model in life if you have one?
I also don't. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I feel like sometimes they just put pressure on me anyway to be a certain way, do a certain thing. And I'm not necessarily trying to achieve or climb. I'm just trying to enjoy what I do. So I kind of avoid trying to follow people.
That's good. I think it's not a bad thing per se. It's just each to their own, right? And some people have multiple role models, which I love. Some people don't have anyone that they particularly look up to, but we learn from each and every single person around us. And I think that's the beauty of life. And finally, in this part, I would love to ask you about education. Now, I'm not sure, you probably haven't taken a course in a while, or maybe you just took a course recently. Regardless, I would love to know about one particular course. This could be something you took a long time ago, but is still really influential to this day.
No, actually, I am taking a course right now in urban planning. I
Oh,
love it. Yeah, I'm sitting into a university class. So I'm not like actually registered, but I'm just sitting in. I did one of the classes as a guest speaker, but I'm listening to all of them. And it's really looking at the role of cities in combating climate change, but also the need for well being in building cities of the future. So, thinking of regenerative cities, restorative cities. So, it's really pushing the boundaries and limits for me, but also looking at how I can apply what I know in completely different contexts. So I'm
yeah.
loving this course. So I'm with all these architects, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is that? Okay, taking lots of notes and writing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
like
is
it.
super cool. Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's something different from what you have been doing. So I'm sure it's really fun for you. I love to hear that you're learning new things. All right, let's talk about today's topic now that we've got to know you a bit better. And I think it provides the perfect context to this conversation. Now, I mentioned earlier, and also in your bio, there's a part where it says about the fact that you research both happiness and well being. And the show is about well being. So let's talk about well being from your perspective. Louise, what does well being mean to you?
I think for me, it's just being well. It's just being well and having a reason to get up in the morning. I know we like to talk about all these complicated well-being models, and I actually don't think it's that complicated. It's just feeling good and functioning well. Um, that's it. I
Yeah.
keep it simple.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes if someone does a lot of research, I think they can get caught up in all the different definitions and the taxonomies. But I think having that simple approach is really important. So I
Right.
love to
Well,
hear that, especially from a researcher. So, from your perspective, again, personal perspective, does not have to be research based. What do you think to be some of the things that people tend to get wrong when it comes to well being?
I think, well, I think part of it is the fault of the media. So there's this idea that you have to be happy all the time. And if you're not, there's something wrong with you. I think that's a tall order to ask of people. So there's that. I think sometimes we confuse kind of how we feel with how we think we should feel. And well being is really about feel everything. Just get through it and do something productive with it. So a lot of these ideas, I don't know where they come from, probably like TikTok or something, but they persist and they're really powerful and they end up shaping what people do, how people think and feel, or how they think they should think and feel. Um, And it makes life maybe unnecessarily harder if you limit yourself to XYZ when in fact all is good. We have permission to think and feel everything. And it's what we do with that. I think there's also misperceptions of what well-being at work also means. Again, you just need to Google, workplace well-being and look at the pictures that come out. There's always somebody jumping in a field. It's like, who does that? And where is this magical person? Or people in a group at work, everybody like high-fiving each other, doing the group hugs. I've never seen this. So again, just the images, the little quotes, kind of the snappy statements that we hear, those are powerful because it really ends up influencing what people think it's supposed to look like. But I would say happiness at work or well-being at work is also no different. It's feeling good when you're there, being able to function well when you're there. I'd also add another piece of relating well to people who are there as well. So yeah, there's lots of misconceptions in the area for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, I actually saw this interesting article the other day. I don't remember where it's from, but essentially it says that your direct manager has the same amount of impact on your health and well being as your partner. And I think that's fascinating. And probably a lot of people don't know this, myself included. I didn't know this until a few days ago. So I'm sure, leadership is so important in shaping workplace well-being, if that's the study and the research. But, in detail, how do you think it's actually describing this relationship? Because people can sort of imagine, okay, my manager affects my well-being, but how?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with that study, and it's about 69%. And I think intuitively, maybe we're kind of shocked that the number's so high, but intuitively, I think we can all go, "Oh yeah, I get that." Right? So if your manager is supportive, understanding, asks for your feedback, it sees you as a whole person beyond just what you can do for them, takes an interest in your growth and development, tries to suit opportunities to your strengths, and the list goes on. um, your career will exponentially grow, but how you feel about yourself and how well you are and how happy you are at work is also going to grow right alongside of that. Conversely, if you've got a manager who is belittling you, bullying you, bossying, just being a like, mean, rude person, or also indifferent, ignoring you, never there, adding no input, not supporting you or helping you to grow, you will likely regress or become really miserable until you end up leaving. So that impact of not only managers, but I think it sort of broadens out the bigger question of what role does leadership play at well-being? And we know that it's a lot, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's tricky to understand the actual relationship between how you're feeling at work and how you're feeling outside of work sometimes, because, a lot of the times we kind of have this tendency to, log out of everything at work. We go out, we go about our days, and then we kind of like, oh, I feel weird. Oh, maybe it has something to do with me. And then, at the end of the day, we reflect on the day. We're like, you know what? She's my manager. Just how I feel in the work environment. Or it could be that it's not the manager per se, but it's the environment that the manager created by caring or not caring. And I think it's actually a tough space to be in, the leadership space. So I would love to understand from your perspective, with given your work, what do you think to be some of the most important qualities in a leader to be able to foster this positive environment for employees' well-being?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. For me, the biggest piece though is really that self-awareness. So understanding and being aware that everything you say, how you say it, everything you do, everything you don't do, what you ask about, what you don't ask about, you're always on stage effectively. And people are watching you, whether you know it, whether you realize it, whether you intend it. You are always sending a message. So I think one of the biggest qualities is being aware of the influence and power. We hate to use that word, but you do have some power there. Now, you can also flip that for the good. So when you become aware that you are on stage, everything you do has an influence, you can then take that a step further and start positively influencing people by being very deliberate in what you say, being very explicit when it comes to well-being, asking the right questions, modeling behaviors. So it's really that self-awareness and influence. But I would also add another quality, and I see this in leaders all the time, managers as well, is, are you already on your own well-being journey? So I get leaders who are like, yeah, well-being's good. And that's kind of where it ends. And then you ask them, like, what does that mean to you? What do you do? Like, for example, what did you do this weekend to have fun? I worked. Okay. Last night I worked. Okay. How's family life? Oh, my family's on holiday. Why aren't you with them? I'm working. Okay. So they don't really have that awareness of what that means. And then you've got other leaders who are like, oh yeah, I just bought a new fitness tracker. I'm running an ultra marathon. I'm tracking my macros, and they're busy after work. Like, do not call me. I'm taking care of my physical health. They're doing all sorts of cool stuff. Maybe signed up with a coach. Like, they're really actively living well-being, and they're on their own well-being journey. So, it doesn't mean you have to go to that extreme, but somebody who is aware of what that actually means. You have to be doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of that that saying, lead by example, right? And I think it's fun to see leaders that are inspiring. At the same time, it can also be toxic, because we're kind of mentioning like all the good qualities. But I feel like if we have a leader that is just extremely positive and does not like see the problem, that's also sort of toxic, because I've been through this in my career where, I had a manager who's always smiley, always happy, always talking about everything that is positive. And even when we have a tough conversation, that manager was like still really positive and smiley, but didn't resolve the problem. And they talked about all the great things that they're doing, and they talk about the fact that, like, just work on it, learn and improve. And it all sounds great in theory, but in reality, I was left with this feeling of, like, my problem's not resolved. That's not what I'm asking for.
Yeah. And we need to be careful not to confuse positivity and well-being. So positive psychology doesn't advocate for being positive all the time, because that actually means you're manic, and that's a mental illness, and that's not normal. And it's not genuine, and it's not authentic. So that's not well-being. Well-being is, when you're feeling good, great, feel good. But when you're not, then address that. And it's, the ability to have respectful conversations with people, where sometimes you have to be very honest, and you may need to deliver bad news, but you do it kindly.
Yeah.
So, being well at work doesn't preclude being honest either. So yes, anything at the extremes is never good.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody shouting at you, but you also don't want somebody so positive that you're like, what is going on here? They're completely disconnected from reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it kind of felt like that for me, when I worked with that manager. It felt great all the time until it wasn't great anymore. And it was just like weird, because you have this person in front of you who's so smiley and like seem helpful, but in fact you're left in a space of continuous confusion.
Yeah.
That's
and
how
it
it
doesn't
felt.
and it doesn't match the situation, and doesn't meet the needs of the situation either. So that's incongruent.
Absolutely. What about that piece of honesty? Because I think honesty is important, yet also tricky. When you think about a leader being honest, there's a certain degree of honesty that a leader, a manager can display to foster that well-being. Because like you said, it's important to have tough conversation. It's important to deliver bad news with kindness. And sometimes there would be information that, employees would like to know, and they kind of guess what's going on, but the manager is not saying it out loud, not clearly. And it leaves the employee in a state of, delusion sometimes. Like, this is happening to my friend. She is guessing what's going on in the team with her role, but the manager is not saying what exactly is going on and not answering the question, sort of like trying to keep the situation seem
A
to be under
mystery.
control. but
Yeah.
or at the same time, it is a mystery. So I think
Yeah.
honesty here is tricky too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes leaders can't say everything. Um, but then it might be about trying to offer some pieces of information to be able to provide that security, but at the same time, not lying about it. So, for example, sometimes managers really don't know, they're in the dark. And I think it's okay to say that we
Mm,
actually don't have that information right now. I
yeah.
don't have that information right now.
Mm,
So we're kind of in this together. We're going to not know together. But
mm,
the moment I do, I will pass that along. But in the meanwhile, here's how I suggest that we proceed. So I think we can be honest when we know something and when we don't know something. It's really just about being authentic and being
yeah.
able to kind of lay your cards down as much as is possible. And again, that's not always the case, but at least being authentic about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's crucial. Again, really important, but quite challenging because it depends on the kind of managers and leaders we have, right? If there's someone like you were saying earlier who's super self-aware, know what they're doing, and it really tries to work for the employees' well-being, then that's a different story from someone who's just there for the title. And I think most of the time that's where we fail as organizations, because we don't know what kind of leaders we need. Yeah. So when we were talking about the fact that it's important to have great leaders to promote well-being in the workplace, there was a small part where we sort of touched on the fact that it's difficult, and I think there are challenges for sure, right? Like it's not easy to be a leader. So, what would be some of the challenges that leaders tend to encounter when they try to foster well-being? Presuming that they have good intention and they're really good leaders.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of roadblocks, and they come at sort of different levels. So sometimes it's from other senior leaders who are like, "What is this nonsense?" They see well-being as a distraction from more important. I shouldn't say more important, but from other business outcomes that they perceive to be more important. So normally it's achieving the next target, the next whatever. Um, and might see at best that, okay, if we are going to do this well-being stuff, well, that's something the employees can do, but like, don't bother us with that. This is really, the serious part of the work, and we'll do that and keep that outside. So sometimes it's convincing the very team at the little table at the top. Other times it's getting resistance from employees themselves. So sometimes employees will be suspicious. So this is where communication is really important. This is where laying the foundation for employee and organizational well-being is also important. There's a lot of work to do leading up to that to get people to understand what it is and be receptive to it. When that's not done, a lot of suspicion. So particularly if you're starting to measure and track well-being, the first question is, what are you going to do with that information? Is this going to come up on my annual performance review? Are we getting fired if we have low well-being? If I don't track my steps for this quarter, what happens, right? And these are legitimate questions. If we're collecting this data, to what end? So sometimes it comes from employees. Sometimes it comes from, again, employees who are legitimately busy. So there's a lot to do. They're already clocking 10-hour days, 11-hour days. They're being pulled in on weekends. And now you want to ask of them, also take care of your well-being. Here's how we want you to do it. It becomes an extra job, in fact. And they're not necessarily going to be paid for that, despite this being a workplace request. Sometimes employees feel it's very intrusive. You're asking me about my weight, whether I smoke, how much exercise, like, why are you asking me this? Am I getting a divorce? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? And it's the line between what is work related, what is part of your personal life, and how much should organizations be asking, or how much should they actually know? Other times the resistance come from managers because, again, they influence 70% of employee well-being. It's huge. And often the burden of well-being falls on them. So we're asking new skills of them. We're asking them to engage. And yes, yeah.
Okay, so as we mentioned before, we touched on this quite briefly, but we've established that while leaders would like to promote well being, especially for those leaders that are really striving for the good of their employees, they will be encountering a lot of challenges when they start to embark on this journey. So, what do you say to be some of the biggest challenges that they might face on this journey?
Yeah, there surprisingly are. And they come from many different places. So sometimes leaders face challenges right from the top. So from other senior leaders who see well being as a big distraction from what really matters. And that's often profit, productivity, and accomplishing whatever goals for that year, because that is their job. That's what they've been tasked to do. So, in effect, they're sometimes looking at the leader and saying, like, really, this is going to move us away from what it is what we've been tasked to do. And frankly, no. So if you really want to do this, you go ahead, but it's going to be something that employees do. Leave us out of it. So often they're not necessarily on board for those reasons. Other times it's employees themselves who may be suspicious of employee well-being programs. And this is where we see that the lead up to these programs is really important. So how they are communicated, really that prior work that is done, explaining why, in what way, to what end, and that takes a lot of prior work that not all organizations recognize they need to do. It's a journey. So sometimes when programming is kind of launched onto employees, their first question is why? What's the purpose of this? What is the outcome? Where does this information go? The data you're collecting, what happens to that? Does this show up on my annual performance review? Do I get less of a bonus this year because I haven't met my step count for the year? Or if I haven't attended X amount of sessions, which, by the way, you've added to my weekly schedule, which I'm not getting paid for, what happens then? So it's the implications of these programs and what they actually mean. And so often it's employees themselves who resist, or who don't see that it's something that's necessarily of interest to them. The irony of a lot of employee well-being programs is that those who have the lowest well-being generally participate the least. Those who have the highest well-being would do it anyway. And if they didn't do it at work, they'd just do it in the gym or do whatever they needed to do at any rate. So it kind of bronze out the question, like, whose purpose is this serving? Sometimes it's managers who also resist because, as you've rightly stated, lots of studies show that managers influence well-being to a huge degree. So a lot of the work, the new skills, the training, the development also and equally falls on them. They are also the most stressed. They're often the most overloaded of any level in organizations. So they will often rebel as well and say, look, we just don't have time for this. And this is a new thing you're adding to my job description, actually. Where and how is this supposed to fit in? So there's actually a lot of pockets of resistance, actually. So well-being sounds like a great idea. In theory, it is, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it really quickly, at many levels in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like a really tricky job for leaders and managers and organizations. So, knowing that they have many layers of obstacles and comes from many sources, what would be some strategies that you think leaders and managers can start to adopt so that they can navigate through this space and promote well-being in a way that would work with their employees?
Yeah. And I think it's being consistent, and just not veering the course, having those same conversations over and over and over again. The more the message gets reinforced, the more the message gets reinforced. I also think, though, it's incredibly important that leaders see themselves as an employee when it comes to well-being. So what often a lot of leaders do, they will, sign the check. Great, off you go. do well-being, and then they're no longer part of it. And that's usually immediately where it starts to fail. So instead, leaders need to be participating in it. They need to be maybe transparent with, hey, here's my well-being score. Here's what I'm doing about it. They need to be attending programming if there's sessions going on. Now, I know they're busy. They don't need to be attending every single day, but not once a year. It needs to be something that they actively do and that people see them do. So, for example, I've seen leaders kind of drop into a session, but they drop in like they're a guest, and everybody stops and everybody says, hello, hi, sir, thanks for coming. And then they, wish everybody well and off they go. That's not participating. That's party crashing, actually. And what they would need to do is say, hi, I'm actually attending today's session. Don't mind me. I'm just going to sit over here and participate. Be a participant. That sends a hugely strong message that well-being really is for everybody, but the leader is doing it, and you can bet everybody's going to be there next week. So it's not just talking about it. You really have to do it, but also how you talk about it. Asking about it, holding people accountable for it. Hey, did you go last week? What did you think of that? Or I'm noticing on the reports this month, well-being is really low in department A or B. Let's, bring them in and maybe we can have a talk about what's going on there and what are things that we can do. So following up on what we call well-being inequalities, where it's low, but also where it's high. Like, how'd that happen? What's going on there? Because we all need to be doing that in some way. Also looking at, what gets rewarded in organizations. So sometimes, we say, yeah, we want well-being. We say we want work-life balance. We say we want kindness and, for people to respectfully engage with one another. But then what actually gets rewarded, we look at who gets the promotions, and it's usually the person who's worked 70 hours that week, who's burnt out, like stressing everybody out, but who's making the most money. And that's who gets rewarded. So we're saying one thing, but our actions are doing something different. So it's also looking at where those inconsistencies and trying to build in those principles of well-being into practices, policies, interactions to really embed well-being into the culture and not just have it be a program or something that employees do or attend or tick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Other things, I think it's also looking at, dedicating resources to it. So if you say well-being matters, then you make it mandatory. With exception. I mean, you've got somewhere to go, great, go do that. But, if you say well-being matters, you commit resources to it. So maybe you hire one person to, run that program or a department, but it's, you give it time, you give it financial resources, you put in the training and the training time as well. So you look at all the enabling factors that are going to hold that program up and bring it to life. So again, it's a lot more than simply just signing the check, but it's all the bits and pieces, the commitments, the communication, everything that comes around it, and and sustained over time. So often we start programs and everyone's really excited, and literally a month later, they just kind of, life goes on and people just get back to work and nobody gives them any attention anymore. So somebody needs to continuously be lifting the charge, and a manager or a leader continuing to do that speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think those are some that you mentioned. Those strategies, I think anyone who is in a leadership position right now can try. However, it's quite a few things to try, right? And maybe they'll get overwhelmed.
Look, if you're going to do anything, it's just be a participant. Start there. Start there. Yeah. And then it becomes sort of obvious as you go. But if you're not participating, then what you're saying is well-being is for employees and it doesn't apply to anybody else. And that is also sending a strong message, because in short, you're saying the problem of ill-being is in the heads of our employees. It's not in the heart of the workplace.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, again, lead by example, right? Super important. So I think we've covered quite a few strategies, and you've shared a lot of different perspectives and tips for those in leadership position. But let's get into our practice and habits section, where we can share one thing today that anyone in our audience can try if they're in a leadership position, or maybe they want to be in a leadership position and foster well-being in the workplace. I think it doesn't take a leader to do it. It can be actually an employee who is willing to lead such initiative, and that shows
Yep.
leadership too. So, what would be a practice that you personally do, or you have done, you have tried before, that you think anyone can try to foster well-being in the workplace, or foster that culture that prioritizes well-being?
Yeah. I try to do this, and you've just reminded me I need to do it this week. But it's really frequently I will check in. So I have my own little team, and I will check in and just say, hey, how's it going? How did it go this week? Is there anything you need from me? Like, basically, how can I help you be amazing? Because when you're amazing, you make me look amazing. But also, I always take the time to say, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for, doing ABC. I really kind of make a point, and it's not just a generic thanks, but it's, you did this, you did this, you did this. I saw that, and thank you for doing that. So I think it's really seeing people, recognizing people, appreciating people, and just giving people the idea that I see you. And when you do great stuff, I see that too. And thanks, because you don't have to do it, but you choose to. And you also don't have to do it here, but you choose to be here. Thank you. So I think these are little tiny things. It doesn't cost anything. It's just say it and see it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, found myself being in so many leadership meetings, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for a lot of one-on-ones, and I had to cancel them. And that just fosters this idea that I've been having. I was thinking, okay, I'll do check-in, but via messages, because I cannot call everybody. And now that you've mentioned that, I will add that component to, the check-in as well. That's such a great tip, just kind of acknowledging their work and inviting them to share anything they would like to share. I think it's important. It's probably most of the time that we get caught up in busyness or whatever it is, and then we forget to do the little things, like you're saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost
It's not
anything.
exactly. And it's also not intentional. I mean, we just get busy and we kind of forget. And again, you just reminded me of it. I'm like, yeah, I need to do that. But it's literally leaving a 30-second voice note. And
Yeah.
that's something we can do when you stopped at a red light, right?
Yeah.
Done. That's one. By the time you get home, you'll have done everybody on your list. So
Yeah.
it actually doesn't take time. It just leaves the door open
Yeah.
also. And
Yeah.
that's really the impact that has.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that practice. Very powerful, and I'll try that myself for sure. Today, I've been starting all these check-ins today, so I'll follow up with that acknowledgement too. And for our audience who would like to know more about your work, I would love to invite you to your open mic, where you can share something you're passionate about, and perhaps also a website link that our audience can check to find out more about you.
Yeah, perfect. So, of course, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. So just Dr. Louise Lambert. My website is happinessmatters.org. You can also find my publications on my LinkedIn page as well. If you just scroll to the bottom, they're all listed there. Also on ResearchGate, the journal, Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology.org. It's really long, but its name says exactly what it does on the box. So that's the best way to name it. And there you'll find lots of original research from the region, the Middle East, North Africa region. Some are in Arabic, some are in English. I also have the first edited book in the region for positive psychology in the Middle East, North Africa. something. I don't remember. Anyway, it's a 2019 publication from Springer. That's on the LinkedIn page as well. So yeah, you can find me in lots of different places, and I'm most happy for people to connect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And well, hopefully we'll have you back some other time to talk about another aspects of well-being or happiness.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.